The plant is golden pothos, scientific name Epipremnum aureum, and it costs about $4 at any supermarket or garden center. You hang the vine over the back rim of your aquarium, you let the roots dangle into the water, and you leave the leaves in the air. From that day on, it pulls nitrogen out of your tank continuously and permanently, and you stop buying nitrate remover because nitrate stops accumulating. But the plant is not the interesting part of this video. The interesting part is what is actually inside the nitrate remover you have been buying, because that product does not remove nitrate either. It stores it. And in exchange for every nitrate ion it takes hold of, it hands something else back into your water, which is a detail that appears nowhere on the pouch. Here is the sequence that plays out in a great many otherwise well-run tanks. Everything is stable. Ammonia 0, nitrite 0, fish healthy, and you are pleased with yourself. Then the third number starts climbing. 20. Then 40. You do a bigger water change and it drops, and a fortnight later it is back. So you buy the pouch, because there is a product for this, and it is sitting right there, and you drop it into your filter, and it works. Within days the reading falls, which is satisfying and which confirms you made the right purchase. 3 weeks later the number starts climbing again. You check the pouch, and it looks exactly the same as the day you put it in, so you assume it has more life left, and the reading keeps climbing. Eventually you replace it, the number falls again, and you settle into a rhythm of buying a new one every month or so for as long as you keep that tank running. Somewhere in there, you also start doing larger and more frequent water changes to hold the line, so the product that was supposed to save you work has quietly added to it. Nobody ever explains why the pouch stops working, or that the moment it stops is the moment it becomes a liability rather than an asset. Put a figure on it. Nitrate removing resin pouches run $15 to $35 and are exhausted within 3 to 6 weeks in a typical tank. So that is $130 to $400 a year if you use them the way the packaging intends. Bottled nitrate reducers are $10 to $25 and get bought whenever the number spikes. A dedicated denitrator, or reactor, is $80 to $200 up front and needs tuning. And the alternative everybody falls back on is simply more water changes, which is not a purchase but is a real cost in time. The Pothos cutting that replaces all of it is $4 once, and it grows you a second one every time you cut it back. Run 2 or 3 tanks, which is where most people in this hobby end up, and the pouch figure multiplies while the plant figure does not, because one established vine produces cuttings for every tank in the house indefinitely. The category is worth examining before the chemistry, because the economics are unusually clean here. A nitrate-removing resin is consumable by design. It has a fixed capacity, it reaches that capacity, and then it must be replaced or regenerated. That is not a flaw in the product, and nobody is being dishonest about it. It is simply the nature of the material, and it means the manufacturer is selling you a container of finite capacity, rather than a solution to the underlying situation. Nitrate is produced continuously by a functioning aquarium forever. So a finite capacity product set against a continuous production process is an infinite sequence of purchases. The bottled reducers sitting beside them on the shelf work differently and land in the same place, because most of them are bacterial cultures paired with a carbon source, intended to drive a conversion that only proceeds properly in water with almost no oxygen in it. A normal aquarium is aerated deliberately and thoroughly, which is the opposite condition, so the results people get from those bottles are inconsistent for reasons that have nothing to do with the quality of what is inside. That is not a scandal, and almost every consumer category on Earth does the same thing. What matters is that this entire product category cannot end the problem by construction, and the $4 plant can. Before I get into the chemistry, one thing worth saying now. Nitrogen export is one leg of a system with several, and your stocking, feeding, and water change routine decide how much nitrogen there is to export in the first place. I have put the complete version together in one place as a full aquarium playbook covering how every layer supports the others. The link is in the description and in the top pinned comment. And if the code is on your screen right now, you can scan it and go straight there. Now, here's what is actually inside that pouch. The material is an anion exchange resin, which is a bead of polymer carrying a fixed positive charge on its surface. Because nitrate is a negatively charged ion, it is attracted to and held by those positive sites, but those sites are not empty when the resin is manufactured. They are already occupied almost always by chloride ions, and the resin works by trading. Every nitrate ion it captures is exchanged for a chloride ion released into your water. That is what an ion exchange resin does, and it is where the name comes from. So the nitrogen has not been destroyed and it has not left the aquarium. It has been moved a few inches from the water column into a bead sitting inside your filter, and your tank has been given a chloride ion in its place. Two consequences follow from that, and neither one appears on the pouch. The first is that the resin fills up. Every site that has traded is a site that cannot trade again. And because the material is selective but not exclusive, other negatively charged ions in your water compete for those same sites and occupy some of them. Sulfate is the main competitor, and it is present in most tap water. So the pouch that worked brilliantly for 3 weeks is not broken and has not gone bad. It is full, and a full resin is chemically inert. If you have ever watched a nitrate pouch go from dramatically effective to doing nothing over a matter of days, with no change in appearance whatsoever, you have watched saturation happen. There is nothing to see, because the change is inside the bead. The second consequence is the one that genuinely matters. A saturated resin left sitting in your filter is not neutral. Ion exchange runs in both directions, and it responds to the relative concentrations on either side, so a fully loaded resin sitting in water whose chloride level has been rising can begin releasing nitrate back into the tank. It becomes a reservoir rather than a sink. This is precisely why the instructions tell you to replace it on schedule rather than when it looks dirty, and it is why the most common way to use these products, which is to leave the pouch in until the reading gets bad enough to prompt action, is the worst possible way to use them. There is a further thing happening in the background of any tank where nitrate is climbing, and it explains why old neglected tanks go wrong in a specific and recognizable way. The bacterial conversion that produces all that nitrate consumes carbonate. Every time ammonia is oxidized in your filter, alkalinity is used up, which means your carbonate hardness falls steadily over months unless something replaces it. So the classic age tank drifts in two directions at once. Nitrate climbs and carbonate hardness falls, and when the carbonate buffer eventually runs out, the pH drops sharply and often suddenly. The nitrate reading was never the whole story. It was the visible half of a slow chemical drift, and the nitrate pouch addresses neither half of it. And here is what that costs, which is more than the price of the pouches. Adult fish are relatively tolerant of nitrate and will sit in an elevated reading for years without dying, which is exactly why the problem persists. What does not tolerate it is everything smaller and younger. Shrimp are markedly more sensitive, and a colony in a high nitrate tank will fail to grow, fail to breed, and lose animals at each molt without any obvious cause. Fry are more sensitive still, so eggs hatch and the young simply do not make it. The keeper watching that tank sees healthy adult fish and concludes the water is fine, then concludes their shrimp were poor stock, and concludes they are not able to breed anything. They were not doing anything wrong. They were told the number sat in a safe range, and safe was measured against the toughest animals in the tank, rather than the most vulnerable ones. So here is why this specific plant, out of everything you could hang on a tank. Golden pothos is a climbing vine from the tropics, and in the wild it grows as a hemiepiphyte, meaning it roots in the ground and then climbs tree trunks, throwing out aerial roots along the stem as it goes. That habit is the whole reason it works here. This is a plant that evolved to run roots into whatever moisture and nutrition it encounters, while keeping its leaves up in the air and the light. Putting its roots in your aquarium is not a novelty use. It is close to the arrangement the plant is built for. Then there is the growth rate, and growth rate is the entire point, because uptake is proportional to growth. Nitrogen is one of the elements a plant consumes in the largest quantity, since it is a core component of amino acids, of every protein built from them, and of the chlorophyll molecule itself. A fast-growing plant is a nitrogen pump. Pothos is among the fastest growing and most forgiving houseplants. Available anywhere, it tolerates genuinely poor light without complaint, and its roots develop rapidly and densely in water. Every foot of vine it puts on is nitrogen that came out of your aquarium and is now hanging on your wall. And there is a specific reason a plant on the rim outgrows an aquatic plant sitting inside the tank, doing the same job on the same nitrogen. It comes down to carbon. A submerged plant has to extract carbon dioxide from water, where it is present at a few parts per million and where it is largely depleted within hours of your lights coming on. which is why plants in most tanks slow down every afternoon. A plant with its leaves in the air is drawing from an atmosphere containing carbon dioxide at over 400 parts per million, continuously, with no depletion and no competition from anything. It also takes room light without a single photon of that light entering your aquarium to feed algae. Aquatic nutrients, atmospheric carbon, and free light, all at once. The leaf being above the waterline is the entire trick, and it is why this outperforms adding more plants inside the tank. There is a second benefit that arrives free with it. A mature root mass hanging in your water is an enormous colonizable surface, and it develops the same biofilm your filter media carries, populated by the same nitrifying bacteria. So you are adding biological capacity at the front of the nitrogen chain, while exporting at the end of it, with no pump, no electricity, and no space used inside the tank. That is the plan. And this is the point where the preparation decides everything, because there is one genuine risk in this method that can cost you a great deal more than nitrate ever did. The full playbook covers the setup and the safe introduction procedures step by step, along with the stocking and feeding decisions that determine how much nitrogen you generate in the first place. The link is in the description and the top pinned comment, or scan the code on your screen, and it will take you there directly. The risk is pesticide. Ornamental houseplants are very commonly treated with systemic insecticides during commercial production, and systemic means the compound is distributed through the whole plant, including the roots and the tissue. Several of those compounds are lethal to shrimp and snails at concentrations far below anything that would trouble a fish. So do not buy a potted pothos, rinse the root ball, and drop it in your tank. Start from a cutting instead, which sidesteps the problem almost entirely and is also free if you know anybody who owns one. Take a section of vine with 3 or 4 leaf nodes on it, cutting just below the lowest node, and strip the leaf off that bottom node so the node itself sits bare. Put the cut and in a glass of water on a windowsill and change the water every few days. Within 1 to 2 weeks, you will see white roots emerging from the submerged node. Give it another week or 2 to build a reasonable root mass, then move it to the tank. If you can only get a potted plant, remove it from the pot. Wash every trace of soil off the roots under running water until the water runs completely clear, and then keep it in a bucket of plain water on its own for 2 to 3 weeks before it goes anywhere near your animals. Mounting is simple, and the rule is absolute. Roots under, everything else above. Drape the vine over the back rim so the roots hang into the water, and train the growing end along a shelf, a wall, or a length of string with small hooks. If you run a hang-on back filter, the filter box is the ideal location, because the roots sit directly in moving water and get maximum contact. Keep roots away from any impeller intake, and if you run a canister, fit a pre-filter sponge on the intake so fine roots cannot be drawn in. Then prune on a schedule, because this is the step that converts the plant from decoration into a functioning export system. Cut the vine back whenever it has put on a foot, or more of new growth, and take the cuttings out of the house rather than leaving them in a vase in the same room. Remove any yellowing leaf as soon as you see it, and expect the effect to build slowly. A fresh cutting does almost nothing measurable. A plant with a substantial root mass after 2 or 3 months shows up clearly on your test kit. Judge it at week 8, not week 2. If you already have a pouch or a bottle sitting in the cupboard, use it up rather than discarding it, and run the plant alongside. The signal you are looking for is that the pouch starts lasting longer between replacements, because the plant is taking a growing share of the load. At some point, you will simply stop reordering, and that will be the moment this became permanent. I want to be straightforward about the limitations because accurate information is worth more than a clean sales pitch. The first is the pesticide risk I have just described, and I am repeating it deliberately because it is the one that can empty a shrimp tank in a night. Cuttings where possible, wash and quarantine where not, and never a plant from a garden that has been sprayed. The second is that this is nitrogen export and nothing else. It is not a filter, it provides no mechanical filtration, and no flow. And it cannot respond to an ammonia spike, which happens on a timescale of hours while a plant works on a timescale of weeks. Keep your filter. The third is scale. Uptake is proportional to plant mass, so a single small cutting on a heavily stocked tank will not move the needle. And the answer is more plant rather than more patience. On a large or heavily stocked aquarium, plant on several vines rather than one, or accept that the plant reduces the rate of accumulation rather than eliminating it. and one point that has nothing to do with fish. Pothos leaves are toxic to cats and dogs if chewed, so place it where a curious animal cannot reach it. And bear in mind that a trailing vine is close to the most attractive possible target for a cat. Now here is the mistake that undoes all of this, and it is the same mistake every time. Stopping your water changes. Somebody sets this up, watches nitrate hold steady at a low number for the first time in years, and concludes that the reason for water changes has been eliminated. It has not. Remember what was happening in the background of that rising nitrate reading. Nitrification has been consuming your carbonate hardness the entire time, and the plant does nothing whatsoever to replace it. A water change is how carbonate and trace minerals come back into the tank, and it is also how dissolved organic compounds leave, which the plant does not remove either. So the tank with the beautiful nitrate reading and no water changes drifts quietly toward a pH crash, while every number the keeper is watching looks excellent. The plant removes one thing extremely well. It is not a reason to stop doing the thing that removes everything else. None of this is exotic, and the plant is not unusual. Golden pothos is one of the most widely kept houseplants on the planet, sitting in offices, hospital corridors, and kitchen windows in every country, very often in nothing but a jar of water, quietly doing the same thing there that it will do on your aquarium. Commercial aquaponics runs on this exact principle at industrial scale, with fish waste fertilizing crops and the plants returning clean water. Constructed wetlands do it in municipal wastewater treatment, where plant roots and the biofilm growing on them process effluent before it is released. The mechanism is not hidden, not disputed, and not new. It simply lives in a garden center, sold by people who have never once been asked what their plants would do for a fish tank, while the finite capacity version of the same idea sits in a pouch in the aquarium aisle with a price on it. If you want the complete system rather than just the plant, the full aquarium playbook covers the setup and safe introduction procedure in detail, the pruning schedule that turns storage into genuine export, the water change routine that handles everything the plant cannot, and the feeding and stocking decisions that determine how much nitrogen your tank produces to begin with. It is all in one place, in the order you actually need it. The link is in the description and in the top pinned comment, and you can scan the code on your screen to go straight to it. And if this changed how you think about that pouch in your filter, give it a like and subscribe, because there is a great deal more where this came from.